Okay, so the last we left off, we had a chart. But what we're missing is I'm missing something for the price, as well as something for the time. These are the things that I need. So I need to add a price axis and a time axis. So if this area here is the chart canvas, well, I need a frame around the whole window and then I need to take the bottom third of the frame to place the time and the right side to place the price. So let's go take a look on how I can do that. So one thing I can do is I can inherit from a keyframe. So my chart view will inherit from keyframe, and that will allow me to use the outer right edge and the bottom edge to place text for price and for time. So if I create this again, there are a few questions that will come up. Let's say that this distance is 150 pixels. And this distance is also 150 pixels. Well, what happens to these prices if this distance right here becomes 300 pixels? So in essence, the window is enlarged. It's scaled vertically. And the same if this is scaled horizontally in X. I need a way to know, hey, I have to space each one of these differently. And what happens when we have spacing that's like this, all of a sudden changes to spacing like this. How do I fill in these gaps? And do I fill in these gaps with something else? Do more numbers get filled in? More prices? What happens? These are all things that need to be calculated. So the vertical range of this window, which is this vertical range right here, this needs to be calculated. Now remember, the vertical range is determined by the high and the low of the number of bars that are on this canvas. So now let's go take a look and see how I can do that. Okay, so the first thing is I need to get the data. So I'll collect the data from my chart model. I'll check to make sure that I have actual candles within my candle data. And I'm using this temporary simply because it's easier to debug. I could take this temp model and put it here, but when I want to debug, it makes things a little easier. So let's look at the offset. My offset for each candle will be the candle space, the candle width, divided by the candle width divided by 2. The in between will be the canvas width divided by the total number of candles per window. Now the zoom factor I'm just going to set for now, just for testing. Then I'm going to draw each candle, and I'll take the candle count divided by the zoom, and then I'll look at my draw time. If it's less than 1, then I want to make sure it's 1, so there's no divisible by 0 errors. And then I need to determine which is the first candle on the chart and which is the last candle on the chart. I will set my first candle to this first candle. I will then subtract the last from the first, adding 1 because I always want 1 on the screen, and I want to make sure that it's greater than the last drawn candle. Then I'll take my first candle and I'll divide it by the current candle, time in each end candle, multiplied by the time in each end candle. So I'm going to square it. X will be set to the first candle minus the last candle, multiplied by the candle slot width, which is this, the width divided by the total count per window. And then I'll just add the offset. And remember, the offset is the space plus the width divided by the width by 2. Then I'm going to loop through all the candles on the chart and check their time, get their time, extract the time, and then when I draw my text, I will draw the text from the bottom of the geometry, capturing my rect H divided by 2, and I need to get the font size. So I need to know what my font size is for the text string that I'm drawing. And then my result is the actual time that I've extracted in hours and minutes. Then I will increment X by each candle, its position, multiplied by the candle slot width. So now let me go take a look. I'll build it, and let's see if it actually works. Okay, great. So now, here are my times. And if I scale the window, you see the times change, and they'll scale. So all of the scaling is working. The times are showing up. Fantastic. Now let me go take a look at the actual price. Now the price is similar to what I was talking about before, where I have my axis on the right, but when it gets scaled, I need a way to determine how many items to actually draw. Do I increase the number? Do I decrease the number? So what I'd like to do is I would like to increase the number. So the smaller it gets, I won't draw as many. The larger it gets, I'll actually draw more. So let me go take a look and see how I can do this. So the first thing I need to check is I need to make sure that the vertical range is not less than or equal to 0. If it is, I need to abort. The next thing I need to do is I'm going to set an auto scroll. Hasn't been implemented just yet, but I will. And then I need to check the chart height. So I want to get the bottom of the chart. I then want to set a height, which will be the chart height. And if the chart height is less than the vertical spacing times 10, I'm going to set the vertical spacing to a multiple of 5. that will be when the window is scaled smaller. Otherwise, I'm going to set it to a multiple of 15. Now the reason why I chose these is because it's visually pleasing. It will dynamically create more or less entries based on basically this rule of thirds: 5, 10, and 15. Then I'll need to have a price step, which will take the vertical range and will divide it by the height by the vertical spacing. I then want to get the bottom of the minimal candle value divided by the price step, multiplied by the price step, and I want to round it up to the nearest price step. Then I'll be able to calculate a new upper and a new lower boundary based on the price step of the bottom of the chart and the price step for the new upper based on the top of the chart. And then I just run a loop between the lower and the upper, grab my string label, draw the text, pass it X, pass it Y, and pass it the price label, and repeat this process from the top to the bottom. Let me build it and see if it actually works. Fantastic. So if I look at this now, here are my price labels. They're all being drawn. Terrific. But now the real test. What happens when I actually scale this vertically? Terrific. Look at this. More space when it gets smaller. And then I'll increase when I scale vertically, and it gets larger. So everything seems to be working really well. There's only one more step left. When I move my mouse around with the crosshair, I want on the bottom for it to display the current time, and on the right, I would like to display a price. So let me go try that. Let's see how I'm going to approach that. So now I'm going to take a look at the price marker. Now, since I'm not going to be scaling these margins where the price is drawn or where the time is drawn, I can actually give it a specific number, which will save on computation simply because it won't have to calculate a width every single time. So the first thing I'm going to do is I do need to calculate the geometry and get the far right. I can calculate the margin with the triangle tip and the triangle width, and I'll set a rect height. So this here will create a triangle, and then this will create the rectangle. I then set the text to the triangle tip plus the triangle width. I want to set my pen color and my brush color and begin the painting process. I then check and say, alright, what's my crosshair price? And I can get the price at the mouse position. I'm going to set the Y position to the chart canvas, which is equal to the mouse position in Y, plus the geometry of the top, which will place it from the top, plus the Y, which goes downward. Then I'll fill the rect, draw my text, create my triangle box. I'll also create a painter path. I'll draw this triangle using the move to and line to, and then I'll fill the path. Then coming down to the time, my crosshair time, I want to get the time at mouse position. I'll set my pen, set my brush. I'll get the mouse position in X. There are no offsets needed. I will need to get the font metrics. So the font metrics will allow me to determine how big each letter is. When I extract the time, I'll then get the time width based on the font metrics of each horizontal letter. Then I can get the font height, and I'd like to create a buffer in between, an offset, and that offset will be 3 pixels. Now, I would like to have a border. The border will be 10 pixels. And my crosshair time, if it's an error, I'm not going to do anything. If it is not an error, then I can go ahead and get the x and the y from the left plus cx, which is the mouse position in x, minus the time width, which is the total distance of the string, divided by 2, because I only want halfway, minus my border, which is surrounding the text, and divide that by 2. My rect y will be the bottom, and I'll give it a 1 pixel buffer. I'll then fill the rectangle with my x and y, my time width plus the border, and then I'll give it a time height and the brush I would like to paint with. The text itself will be drawn using the rect x plus the border divided by 2, because I want it halfway. And then I'll take rect y plus the time height minus the time height divided by 4, because I only want a quarter of that time height. Then I pass it the string, which is the time. So now let me build and let's test it out and see if it actually works. Okay, so here's my chart. And when I roll my mouse over, look at that. That's fantastic. Look at this. So each bar, when it's over the actual bar, 1444, 1446, 1448. If I come on over to here, 1558. Look at that. That's perfect. If I roll off a bar that doesn't have anything, nothing's there. And look at my prices. Right on the money. Perfect. So everything seems to be working really well. It's still fast. Fantastic.